Mental is a film that my partner wanted to see for quite a while when she heard it was coming out, because it's directed by PJ Hogan, well, written and directed by PJ Hogan, who is the guy who did Muriel's Wedding, another film starring Toni Collette, who's in this as a main character, which my girlfriend absolutely loves, so she really wanted to see this. So we picked it up when it came out and watched it, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to review it, because it's actually a very sort of surprisingly touching and good film. I really enjoyed this movie. It's not perfect, but basically let's get the plot out of the way. So it follows a group of 5 teenage sisters whose mum is committed to a mental institution, and their father, in the mum's absence, picks up a hitchhiker called Shaz, played by Toni Collette, and asks her to basically babysit and look after and be the nanny of the 5 sisters. Shaz, needless to say, has a sort of profound effect on all the girls, and it's very much a sort of dramedy. It's an Australian movie, as you've probably guessed, being directed by PJ Hogan and starring Toni Collette. It also stars Liev Schreiber from X-Men Origins Wolverine and the Scream films, who I really like, and does a very convincing Australian accent. When I saw this and saw him in it, I was like, is he Australian in real life? I thought he was American, but apparently he's American, he just does a very convincing Australian accent. What I like about this movie is that tonally, you couldn't sort of categorise it. It is funny at times, it's touching at times, it's quite dark at times. It feels like, in a certain regard, it can't decide what it wants to be, but I sort of found that to be quite interesting with this, because it almost sort of wrong-foots the audience on several occasions and keeps things fresh. Because I think sort of too often with dramedies, they can feel a bit like they're trying too hard to be quirky and kooky, whereas this didn't feel like that at all. It has its quirky and kooky moments, but it didn't feel too sort of try hard to me. I did enjoy it. I quite like the dialogue. All the 5 teenage girls are all played really well by the young actresses. They all basically consider themselves to be mental, hence the name of the film. When they're not, they're just normal teenage girls. However, one of them does actually have psychological issues such as schizophrenia, and Shaz's character, it becomes apparent very quickly, almost immediately, that she's probably mental. Her backstory, when it's eventually revealed, is quite dark and oddly touching in a way. Her relationship to Liev Schreiber's character is quite interesting. The film is interesting. It's kind of a little surprise of the year so far. Whether or not it'd be in my top 10, I don't know if I'd go that far. But there are certain aspects of it that I found really interesting. Like Shaz pointed out that, you know, the other people in the neighbourhood all have psychological issues, such as obsessive compulsive disorder is one that they sort of play with in this. And I found all that to be very sort of interesting, and it's always done in a tasteful way. It never feels, you know, like it's going to offend anyone. It's just a surprising little dramedy. Toni Collette, who is probably one of my favourite actresses working today, is great in this as Shaz. She has a great presence. The character of Shaz's quite sort of prickly, but you do sort of fall in love with her over the course of the film. She is very likeable. The standout performance has to be the mother, Shirley, who's committed. She's played by Rebecca Gibney. She sort of brings a lot to that role, because while at first when you're introduced to her and she's singing songs from The Sound of Music in a back garden, and it's filmed in the same sort of way as Sound of Music was, and it's a big musical number, while she brings the sort of quirky and kookiness to the role, she also brings an undercurrent of sadness, and she's actually really good in this movie. And her sort of character arc is quite fulfilling. So Mental, there's not an awful lot I can sort of say about it without spoiling it, but it is a good little movie. If you're stuck for something to watch, we sort of, like I said, picked it up on the fly, only knowing who had made it. But I would recommend it. It's not going to be to everybody's taste, because I know a lot of people sort of don't like these sort of indie dramedies, but if you go in with an open mind, I think you might enjoy it, especially if you like Toni Collette, because she's great in it. So I would recommend Mental. It's not one of the best films I've seen this year, but it's just a nice little surprise in the movie.